So you know how when you are just entering high school or college, you don't know what's going on, you look around and you see some other students who are juniors or seniors, and you're like, whoa, they really have it together, like in the midst of everything that's going on. They're sort of more stylish than you, confident, smart, they've learned so much more, and you think, oh man, how am I ever going to get there? And there's a big gap. Oh, that's how I feel about Robin Hunicke, who I think I first became aware of her in that way when you see like the older cool girl walking down the hall about 10 years ago at the GDC rant session, which then was in its second year. And at that session, Frank Lance was one of the ranters, and he sublet exactly 1 minute of his rant to Robin, who pointed out something that I had noticed earlier in the week, which was that all down the hallway at that year's GDC, there were all of these sort of cheesecake pinup fantasy artwork posters, or like big paintings of scantily clad women with chainmail bikinis. I think it was like a lot of Boris Vallejo stuff. Yeah, and so I had already been working in the game industry for a few years and become sort of inured to that, and I was like, okay, yeah, more of that stuff. But Robin actually got up and said, this is really not the future. This is not innovation. This is not what we need to be seeing at GDC, and I really think it's due to the pioneers of objecting to that kind of thing, like Robin, that we have seen some progress, of course not total progress by any means, in the last 10 years. And it was very inspirational for me. I think it opened my eyes. I was like, whoa, you can actually get up and say something instead of just being like, oh, no. But I should say something about all of her other accomplishments too. Robin, before that GDC had been already for years studying artificial intelligence and dynamic difficulty. At that time, she was working at Electronic Arts, where she contributed greatly to the Sims franchise, to Boom Blox, then went on, of course, very famously to That Game Company. She worked on the award-winning Journey. And then one of my favorite lesser-known projects, a very special, wonderful, unique MMO called Glitch. And now Robin is at Funomena, a company which she's started up, where they're working on several games. I'm sure you will hear more about them in a second, but they include, AR experiences in a project called Woorld, VR puzzles in Luna, and a collaboration with Katamari Damacy creator Keita Takahashi called Wattam. On top of that, Robin's also played a major hand in Indiecade, IGF, the Experimental Gameplay Workshop, the Game Design Workshop at GDC, and many of you may also have seen her name at the top of a paper on mechanics, dynamics, and aesthetics. So she's left a huge mark on the field of game design education and thinking, and is now also an associate professor at UCSC. I could just keep on going and going, but I'm going to turn it over to her. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to attempt to get through these slides pretty quickly so that we can get to your questions, because I feel like there's a lot of success bias in our industry, and having experienced a lot of that myself, I don't want to stand up here and tell you how to hustle, but I'm just going to describe a little bit of my experience. I was asked to talk a little bit about what it means to run an independent game studio, and I think that in order to understand that, you have to think a little bit about the background that I have and my privilege, as well as the opportunities that presented, and then ways of getting that shit for yourself. So I've been running a business now for 4 years. It's called Funomena. And we are really making weird experimental titles there. Wattam, which we announced at E3 last year to rave reviews. Woorld, which we just released. So actually my last game is no longer Journey. It's currently Woorld, which is really fantastic. That's a Tango project, which is available to be played on the Fab 2 Pro phone, which Lenovo released. It's the very first AR phone ever available in the world. And then Luna, which we just revealed at PAX and Oculus Connect, Indiecade, and most recently Day of the Devs, which will be released in the spring of next year. Making games is especially difficult as a practice, but making experimental games is really hard. And a lot of times people come up to me at conferences, especially women and underrepresented minorities, and say, how did you do it? How did you get this great team together? How did you get the financing? How are you still standing? I'm really not able to speak about the experience of everyone in the games industry. I can only speak to you as a white, college-educated feminist with a middle-class background, 2 parents who really told me I could succeed at anything I wanted to do, who chose, kind of by accident, to pursue a career in computer science in the early 90s before people were telling me that I couldn't do it. So I really want everybody in the room to take anything I say with a heap of salt, because, like I said, I don't think I can tell you how to do it for you. But I do want to sort of talk about what I did, and maybe you will get some benefit. So the thing that I want to talk about is creative entrepreneurship. And before I go there, I wanted to kind of unpack my privilege. This is really describing the thing that got me from my mom's womb to here now. So I went to a relatively good school in upstate New York, and it was filled with the gifted and talented program where I learned how to use computers to make art. And then I moved to Central Florida for high school, which wasn't super, and I really struggled with school for a little bit, like being at school physically but not being there mentally, if you know what I mean. And I was sent away, actually, my 16th year to summer program in Cambridge to study computers and art, and it saved my life. And I went to college, and I decided to do a choose-your-own-adventure major combining women's studies, computer science, art, and film, because I was really interested in oral narrative and storytelling and how computers could help us. And I stuck around after graduating in 3 years, so I didn't have too big of a bill there. And I became a lackey in a grad lab, and then eventually kind of wheeled my way into grad school without taking a GRE. I was studying collaborative filtering and search at the time, and then I got interested in AI, and as we heard, I started thinking about planning and simulation in games, and I kind of started to hang out with a bunch of nerds that were also interested in the same stuff. One of those nerds is here in this room, Eric Zimmerman. We started working on a curriculum guide for the IGDA, because at that time, there were literally no programs teaching games in colleges. So we started this little group of education summit things where we would meet at GDC, and researchers and game designers would talk together about how to teach games, and it was pretty cool. I also started to hang out with some other folks that were also involved in that same thing, doing these game jams, which hadn't been invented yet. We did that for a while. I was actually kind of the technical coordinator for the game jams at first, just doing a lot of the computer stuff, and eventually became a jammer myself. Which led to doing the experimental gameplay workshop at GDC, where we would showcase games that we made in the jam, but also make room for games that were different, like Portal and Katamari Damacy, and started kind of promoting this idea that big games weren't the only kind of games people were making in our community, and that they were actually pretty cool, although at the time it was still hard to publish them. This led me to start teaching in a workshop, which Mark LeBlanc, who is also here, was leading, and as a result of that workshop, I published this paper. And I realized at that moment, around 2004, that I was cramming my interest in games into computer science and AI very, very deliberately, and it wasn't necessarily going to be a successful path for me. So I left. I left before I finished my PhD, and my dad was like, "You did what?" And I went to work with Will Wright on The Sims, and eventually started basically thinking about how to think of myself as a commercial professional game designer, but it was pretty difficult. I got promoted really quickly, probably too quickly. There was an experimental new platform called the Wii they wanted to make a game for, and so I moved into that. And then eventually I went down to LA to work with Steven Spielberg on Boom Blox, and then I got recruited away from EA by Genova Chen to make Journey. So that's my life up until I started Funomena. Some things to notice here: when I started volunteering and doing random projects with people, I was still in graduate school, and I spent about 5 years of graduate school randomly hanging out with cool people and trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And this was very influential in my career. I also went to work at a huge company on a giant franchise, even though my heart of hearts was always built for indie games. The people that I met while volunteering and goofing off at these game jams have helped me find work at organizations and given me projects for the rest of my life. And before I started working on Journey, I would say I had a very low profile with most game players. However, my reputation within the industry, specifically about volunteering, my interest in educational environments that supported more people learning how to do game design, and systems that promoted the expression of and celebration of independent games and different games, made an essential point about who I was and what I believed in. I think that these two things were essential to having more people and different people making games, which was something that I was really passionate about, especially since when you look back at my career, I didn't really have a lot of people to look to. So in 2004, before I left my PhD, which I had been pursuing for 8 years to do games, a friend of mine asked me to do an interview, and this is what I said. My dream job is an amalgam of jobs, but what I'd really like to do effectively is be somebody who's like shaping and helping other people in the world make great things, right? But I don't know how to do that yet, so I'm gonna go off and find another job, some kind of low-level, entry-level job where I can be of service. Looking back, it's a little bit like, wow, she already knew what she was doing the whole time. She was just clairvoyant, right? I mean, I just knew. But it wasn't like that. It was like this, because every single person that was a mentor of mine was a dude. I did not have a female mentor until I hired an executive coach when I was working on Journey. So, just to make it really clear what my privilege meant to me, this is what it looked like when I started. I got an education, I went to college, I got a graduate degree, during which I did a bunch of volunteering, and then I started getting paid to do what I loved, and then eventually I became the boss lady. Now, that means that the majority of my life has been spent doing what I love and learning about what I love, and it was paid for by my family and the government's tax dollars, and then me. And I don't really think that that's necessarily the thing that's going to be happening moving forward. But I also don't really think that we should freak out about it, because if we decided to freak out about it, we would be giving our power away to the forces of uncertainty that rule our lives now. Instead, we should just kind of like figure this shit out. So, what do I think you need in your toolbox? Well, I can only talk about creative entrepreneurship from the perspective that I have. Well, when you start off as a designer or a programmer or a future CEO, what's in your toolbox? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. You have nothing. You're a total idiot. You know not what you're doing. Admit it. You are so dumb. Oh man, if I could just go back in time to 2004 and tell myself that. But over time you do things, and that means that you get experiences, right? And your experiences sort of crenulate and turn into failures. You fuck up all the time. It's totally cool. You're doing it. And what happens with those failures is that they start to collect and crenulate, and they compress down until they become stories, which you share with other people. And those stories are really great over a beer or 8, and when you share them with others, guess what happens? Their stories glom onto your stories, and that turns into a beautiful katamari, which then eventually crenulates down, and that turns into intuitions. And your intuitions are what you have in your toolbox when you're a senior old lady, boss lady designer like me. I tell my students this all the time. When you go to a meeting, when you start your business, when you go to a funder asking for money, the only thing you're bringing into that room are your intuitions. That means if somebody says no, or they don't like your idea, or they don't understand what you're talking about, that you're just experiencing your intuitions, and they're experiencing your intuitions. It's not a battle. No one's right. No one's wrong. Intuitions are shared and experienced. They are not won and lost. So, with the next 10 minutes or so, I would like to talk about my own failures, stories, and intuitions that came from those, so that maybe we can have an informed conversation about the things that you're facing in the future. Hopefully, they'll be of some use. Failure number 1 is one that I made on early, and unfortunately I still keep making, which is that I have too much shit to do. How many of you are struggling with this failure right now? I'm just going to take a long drink and let you think about that. Okay, so we live in an age where people can seek your advice constantly. They can ping your phone constantly. Your email is forever. It will never go away. It's increasing all the time. But what I really wanted to share about this story was a story about titles, actually. When I interviewed around in 2004 and 2005, a lot of people thought I was a fucking genius and that I could do anything in the universe for them that would make them money. And if you buy into that shit, you end up in a job that you can't do, right? So I actually did take an entry-level job at The Sims making objects on an expansion pack. Like when I told my snobby game designer friends that that was my first job, they were like, ooh, that sounds like so boring. But it was awesome. I learned a ton. Every time I did a good job, someone said I did a good job and they were happy for me. And they didn't care that I didn't know anything because there were so many other people around that knew stuff. And also if the flower station didn't work or the lemonade didn't come out right from the lemonade stand, it wasn't going to destroy The Sims. You know, it was an okay job for me to suck at. And I didn't suck at it. I was actually pretty good. Unfortunately, I got promoted very quickly. And like I mentioned, that wasn't necessarily the best thing in the universe for me. Or was it? At the time that I was promoted, I was the only female working on The Sims, the entire franchise, as in everything, including The Sims 3. And they were very interested in having a woman come out and talk about Sims pets and, you know, be an example to the design community of all the great feminist stuff that we're doing with The Sims. So there was actually a new platform that was available called the Wii, and I was asked to participate in a design contest where I could, present a design that the potential new Wii game could be for The Sims. And I presented a Western farming and settling sim based on Mule and Harvest Moon, because those were my big games at the time, and I won. And then the marketing team said that there were no such thing as Western games that sold, and so we ended up deciding to make a chibi-style Wii game, blah, 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 blah. The thing that matters in this story is that when I started as lead designer on this project, I had the title and I had about 8 people that I was prototyping the game with. And about 4 months into the prototyping schedule, guess what happened? A PC game finished and 70 people rolled onto my team. 11 producers, 1 designer, 1 art director. A lot of antsy animators and artists and programmers. What are we doing? What are we doing? What are we doing? What's the plan? What's the plan? What's the plan? Guess what? We didn't have a plan yet. It wasn't super great. It was probably one of the scariest moments of my life. I did get 2 little baby designers to come and work with me on the project, but it was a total slog. And I'm not super proud of the results. We did not take advantage of the Wii like we should have. There were a lot of features that I planned that got cut because the Wii itself was changing all the time. I was a total idiot. I had no idea what I was doing. It feels so good to admit that. But over the years, I've heard so many stories from developers who have made the same mistake. They start off kind of thinking that they know what they're doing, and then they bite off a little bit more than they can chew, and pretty soon, that title, that job, that franchise they really wanted to work on, being a creative director, being in the limelight, it ends up being a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety and a lot of pressure, and it makes people feel really bad feels. And so, in a way, what I learned, my intuition is you get what you want. What I really wanted, what I said in that little interview in 2004 that my friend did and put up on the internet, it's still there, was that I wanted to be a people person, that I loved AI because I loved people. And here I was suffering. So I went to an advisor of mine who was at EA, a dude, and he said, you have 2 problems. 1, you're pretty and you're smart and it's really intimidating to all the guys you work with. 2, you're really ambitious and you're not very much of a team player. So I had to think about that. Okay, well, most of that is sexist bullshit. But some of it is true. I'm actually pretty fond of talking. I mean, I'm up here. I run a business. I look fine. Like, I am always trying to be the center of attention. Am I a team player? Am I really looking out for my sisters and my brothers? Am I really living with integrity? Did I really try that hard to make sure we were all successful? No. I was freaking the fuck out because I didn't know what I was doing, and I was trying super hard not to let anybody know. So guess what? Everybody knew. So I took a job. I took a different job. I became a producer where I had absolutely no design authority. I was not in charge, and I had to learn to work through others. That leads to the second failure, which is blaming other people. How many of you struggle with this one? You can be honest, I'll close my eyes. Right. I think it probably took me about a year of working on Blox, kind of slogging around and taking notes and like, yes, I'll get that coffee for you. I'll do this thing. Yes, okay. Fine, I'll make the list. I'll change the list. I will make the thing. Yes, okay. Before I really let go of the fact that it wasn't everybody else. It wasn't my boss. It wasn't my boss's boss. It wasn't the shareholders at EA that were pushing for bigger teams and bigger profits with smaller amounts of time. It was really that I hadn't been truly working for the people I was working with. I'd been working for myself. And I would say that it took me a long time to get over that anger, especially with respect to how the project was managed, because I felt out of control the whole time. So a few years later, this is the story, I'm working on Journey, and I'm at a hotel breakfast in Europe at Gamescom, and this dude comes up to me and is like, Robin, I don't know if you remember me. And I can like place the face, but I can't really remember the guy. And he's like, we were together at Redwood Shores. And immediately I was like in a shame attack. Oh my God. So I started apologizing. I was really young then. I was making all these mistakes. I'm sorry. He's like, no. I just wanted to say that I was in a couple of meetings with you where your senior colleagues shredded you. They put you on the pike, and especially the dudes in the room, and I am so sorry that I didn't stand up. What's the intuition you take away from that? Your memories are not reality. The things that you remember about your past as a designer or a leader, a contributor, or potential CEO, a voter, they are not real. What you remember are the little things you take out and talk about all the time. The things that you go to the bar and confess to your friend. Why did they, or how dare they, or do you know? How can we even? That's what you remember. Your brain polishes those things and keeps them nice and shiny for you. And then when somebody that you don't know comes to you and talks to you about your reality, you'll see a very different person. I was spending a lot of my time remembering the worst things about that project instead of the best things, were all the things that I learned. Really, what I was doing was failure number 3, blaming myself. How many of you struggle with this? My people. Sensitive nerds deep down, suffering from a strong sense that every single thing that we do is wrong. Everything is uncertain. If something goes wrong, maybe it just went wrong. What was it about me that made me so sure that it was my fault that my last game had been super, super popular or great? Actually, franchise-wide sold like 8 million units. It's like a super popular kids game, and my students constantly tell me, I played MySims. But I'm just, it wasn't perfect, right? So that doesn't mean that I'm not working very hard to fight this every day and turn it into good intuitions. But I have in the past spoken at length about this fear, the fear of uncertainty that we all face when we're working on games. I did a talk at GDC Europe right after Journey shipped, actually, about the tensions on the team that rose as we got closer and closer to the goal, but didn't know how close it was. It was just over the hill and we couldn't see it. So we were, 2.5 years into the game and just like, what are we doing? Are we going to get canceled? And actually, Alex Evans from Media Molecule just recently gave a talk about this on the technical side with the research that they were doing on the project that they're now using to build dreams. I think it's a very common story, but I can put the links to those things in my talk. But the thing is that not knowing on Journey had me laying in bed late at night, eyes wide open, freaking the fuck out about not knowing. And every single time, I turned it back on myself. And it was really like, okay, I'm no longer blaming everybody else. Now it's coming into me. Now it's all about my control and my ability to run things as a producer. Well, the intuition here is not genius, but it is something that is hard won. You can only do what you're doing. You just can't do anymore. Give yourself a break, If something isn't perfect, it just isn't perfect. If it goes wrong, it went wrong. You weren't probably the cause of it, and you're probably not going to solve it. But if you have this illusion of control and destiny and being perfect, well, you're certainly going to lay in bed awake a lot. And that means that you're not going to be present when you're shaping your company's destiny or in that pitch meeting or talking to your friend. You're just going to be spacing out, blaming yourself inside of your own body. And that's a really lonely place to be. Which leads to the 4th and final failure of this talk. Being too afraid or too ashamed or too angry or too upset to ask for help. How many of you suffer with this? Yeah. About halfway through the promise of making Funomena a reality, we had an unexpected financial hiccup. The details of the hiccup are not important. In fact, they would probably be distracting from the reality of this message, which is that when this was happening, despite all of my attempts to avoid failures 1, 2, and 3, I began to engage in failure number 4. And I was drowning under the weight of carrying the future of Funomena and being able to pay everybody. And oh my God, what if we can't make payroll? And I wasn't talking to anybody about it. So I had to be down in LA for a meeting and a conference, and my sound designer, Brad Foch, who I worked with on Blox and who is a superhuman soul, was there. And so we got up, still in our PJs, we walked down Venice Beach, and I just cried and talked out loud very early in the morning. But some of the Venice Beach artists were out there, and they were putting out their wares, and that's when I saw it. That's me in my pajamas. He said, "You know what? That's what you need." And I was like, "You know what? You're right. It's totally inspiring. It's amazing." And I bought it, and it's still in my house to this day. The point is that good people understand and bad people kind of don't. But really what it is that good people know that you're doing your best, and people who tell you that you're not can shut the fuck up. Like, I was really, really suffering, and Brad said to me, "You're doing the best you can. If the company goes under, we're all going to get paid more doing something else anyway. Like, it's not like we're rolling in the dough. You know, like, Google's right here. You can surf every day. I can teach you," right? I mean, in the end, really, good people support you and tell you that it's okay. And if you surround yourself with good people, by asking for the help that you need, it makes the job so much easier. There are too many failures in my story for me to continue talking about them. So in the last few minutes, I'm just going to sum up my intuitions about making games and game companies, and I hope that we can talk about them after. You need to know your value and your values. Martin and I, when we founded Funomena, decided that we were worth a living wage in San Francisco plus healthcare, and that anyone that lived in San Francisco and worked with us would too. And actually, anyone in general. So we charge a pretty high per person man-month rate. If we can't get that money and do the things we want to do, then we don't want to build a company where we're doing half that on things we don't care about and everybody's stressed out and freaking out. Give up. It's better to give up if you can't do it right than to do a shitty job of it. You need to decide what you're going to learn every time you take a job, start a game, start a company, start a relationship, end a relationship. Every single time, decide what you're going to learn. Even the shittiest thing that you have to do can teach you something, but you need to know what you're learning. Martin and I decided to see Funomena as a learning process, which is good because it's been really fucking weird. But like, you know, if you think about it as an opportunity to improve yourself and to improve the people that you bring along for the ride, that makes everything better. Because the failures themselves and the stories, they're a lot funnier when you can be honest about them. And honestly, it's about finding that little kernel at the end of the pain. You really need to routinely assess those failures and share them with other people so that you can pack your toolbox faster. The more you admit your failures and the more you share with other people, the more you learn how incredibly, painfully not unique you are. Every single time that you're sitting at the bar with your friend and you're just like, you know, Jesus Christ, I was in this meeting today and I started talking along with the producer and then they were really offended because I'd interrupted them and like, why can't I just shut my mouth? Like I have a notebook and everything and it just doesn't work. Every time you have that conversation, you're finding the opportunities to learn best practices from another overly talkative designer that you're friends with. You need to play the long game, and this is the hardest one to explain, probably because I'm just learning to do it myself. You remember this list? Well, here's the other one. I had that little job at Glitch after our journey. Then I left because it wasn't going to ship, and I was really not needed. Then Martin and I decided to go for it. We started to file the paperwork for the company and bring Kata over from Vancouver. And then it worked. And at just around that same time, we got a very small NSF grant that helped us bootstrap the company, hiring people for like $50 an hour to work on a small educational game in their spare time and weekends just to find the right phenomenauts. It was really a recruiting process. Then it worked again. We got a deal. We started hiring people, which felt really surreal because now we had an office with people in it. The office has one bathroom, no hot running water, and no air conditioning, just so you know, it's not really a palace. But I'm still a goddess. Then we found another strategic partnership, this time with a hardware partner that was interested in experimental controls. And then I was recruited with tenure to UC Santa Cruz, which also felt like a magical gift from the universe, where I built a new major in games and started accepting students, which was also amazing. And then even as that was taking off, one of our partners decided to stop working with us. And then we found another strategic partnership to help offset the losses. I began to hire help at school. I began to hire help at Funomena and to really openly ask for the help that I needed because I was wearing way too many hats. And then we shipped our first game in November. This is what it felt like. Holy shit. It's kind of amazing. So like, the thing I wanted to end the talk with is this. I think that life is a lot like Carcassonne. You only get a certain number of meeples, and every tile that is revealed is a complex set of opportunities, costs, and potential losses. If you spread yourself way too thin, you may not be able to take advantage of the opportunities that present themselves later on. So remember to manage your priorities and specifically to make your self-care your number one priority, or you will get overextended and exhausted, and you'll make poor decisions and be a poor leader or a poor contributor or both. The rules are pretty basic, and they're pretty easy to understand if you think about it. Getting upset at other players for turning over a good tile or starting a city without you isn't going to help. Why not see if you can collaborate? If you can't, figure out a way to get into that city and turn their work into something good for yourself. When you realize you've invested in something that isn't going to get done, let it go. Don't spend the whole game or your whole life belly aching about one little meeple you could have popped off the board if only you had turned over the right piece. That is absurd. The piece was hidden from you. It's hidden information. You can't know it. Maybe you just had too many beers. Whatever happened, it's done. Move on. Looking over the board, if somebody nearby you is in a similar screwed situation, maybe you should reach out and see if they'd like to join your city. Or maybe that you could trade a move, popping one of their little meeples off the board so that you can get one back. Often, there are many other people in the same situation as you if you would just recognize how truly ununique you are. Think about taking a deal and then backstabbing? Be careful, because if you play dirty, it's a small industry, and it's a small world, and it's a short life, and that shit comes back to you. Maybe the key is to look at the game not just as the only game, but as one in a series where you are testing a strategy and figuring out what tactics will support it. Even if you didn't win then, you could still learn. Lost games make great stories, especially over beer. There's a pretty sad Maxis story here about me playing Carcassonne with a bunch of tile counters that also wanted to play the game with every single expansion pack, and I'll just skip to the ending, which is me 5 hours later on my first full week of work with a headache being like, why didn't the other designers tell me? You know why they didn't tell me, because it made a great story. Don't forget about the farmers. It's pretty easy to look at short-term goals like shipping a game, getting a title out, getting a title on your business card, earning a specific salary, buying a house, whatever, and lose sight of the investments that you need to make in your own relationships and in your community. In fact, you could argue in light of recent events that ignoring the long expanses of farmland between cities can be a devastating mistake. First-time players of Carcassonne often feel very ripped off when a clever player flops down at just the right moment and wins. But that doesn't make it illegal. It's in the rules, and it's been there the whole time. And if you didn't see it coming, that's your problem. Life is short. We come in all shapes and sizes. Opportunities come in all shapes and sizes, and there are games and companies of all shapes and sizes waiting to be made. Unfortunately, they are not waiting to be made in the time that I made mine, or in the time that mine lives and possibly dies. But I'm hoping that this talk goes out there and it influences you or younger people you know or older people you know who can use it in a time of need. And even if you aren't young, I just want to say, even if you're mid-game, late game, you can still adapt and use these ideas and make each day better by working on yourself. You improve your team, you improve your game, you improve the company you're building, and you improve your society. In the end, we are all working on ourselves, one sunrise at a time. We're all just figuring it out. We're all just practicing. Thank you.
for you. Here's a mic for you.
Cheers.
And I get the privilege of asking first question, so I'm actually going to ask two. One of them is in my role as first-year high school student. Who do you think should be running for class president of games?
Oh boy, I think Siobhan Reddy should be running for class president of games.
Nice, okay.
Yeah, I think she's like the best lady on the planet. And also she's really like kind and she has a lot of humility and she hates getting up on stage and talking. So I'm just saying that to make her have to do that more. It's kind of a troll.
Tell people who don't know Siobhan.
Siobhan is, she's the producer that runs Media Molecule, like the bestest, most lovingest studio in the whole world. And they're just really great people and they really believe in like making games for the sake of doing research and finding new experiences in technology. And I just love them. They're great.
Excellent. Shout out. So, and my second more serious question is a question I'm going to pass along that's been asked me many times about whether or how we should look at work that we feel like is being offered to us, or a speaking role, or some opportunity where, say, as a woman in games, and I think this applies to people of color and many other marginalized groups as well, where you're like, wait, why am I being offered this? Do they want me for me? Do they want me to be the representative of all women in games? Or, you know, like where's this attention exactly coming from? How do you deal with that?
So lately what I do is I try to pass it on to somebody that I think is like-minded, but not necessarily as busy or as it sort of exposed and experiences me, because like everybody knows who I am and I'm just going to get up there and say the same thing I always say. So, you know, and a lot of these things are opportunities to just meet people and get out there. So I encourage women to do it, and you know, underrepresented minorities and people that have been underserved traditionally or undervalued in our community to do it. But I encourage them to ask for the money that they will use to get there. And ask for the support that they need in preparing for it so that they don't feel put on the spot or like they're going to do a bad job. Because I think it's really criminal to invite people to stand up and potentially put themselves in the firing line for a cause without the preparation or the support that they need to do it effectively. And so to that end, actually, I've been working on a couple of initiatives just in the background. You know, there's one at GDC now called Amplifying New Voices and stuff, where we try to like build the opportunity for people to experience, you know, media training essentially before they get up there. I did an interview recently with Vice magazine where the guy in the interview was sort of like, I have to ask you the question, you know, and I was like, do you really have to ask me that question? Because I've been counting how many interviews for the last year everyone's asked me that question, and I can tell you it's been every single one.
Does anyone not know what the question is?
What is the question? Just shout it out.
What is it like being a woman in games?
Yeah, there you go. You got it. And so I was like, you know, it's really interesting. Did you ask Kojima that question? And he was like, no. I was like, because he's an Asian in games, I guess. Like, if you really want to think about it, right? Like, come on. Like, what is this? But in the end, actually, he was really cool. And he wrote a great article in which he sort of said, you know, I'm not going to ask the question. I'm just going to support this person. I'm going to put them out there for who they are. And so I think that's the other thing that a lot of people need to do is you need to assume that you are there for the right reason and you have every right to ask for the things that you want. And if people tell you you can't get it or you don't deserve it or it's not okay to ask, then they're wrong. That's it.
Countering imposter syndrome. Okay, let's take some questions. Anybody? Well, yes, bye.
How do you navigate the burning of bridges, especially as you gain more power and progress in your career?
So the burning of bridges.
repeat the
So
question.
someone asked me, how do I navigate the burning of bridges? I try not to burn bridges myself, although I definitely have set a few on fire by accident. Mostly because I'm running around with a Molotov cocktail. Why do I do that? That's so dumb. I think that it's a very small industry, and friendships are formed in contexts where we are socializing, and also business is done in contexts which we are socializing. There's a lot of sort of this weird blend between friends and collaborators, coworkers and buddies, funders, and like drinking buddies. And it's definitely like a weird thing that is more endemic in this industry and also film than a lot of other industries. I think we're getting past it because the boys club is kind of disappearing. And as that happens, we are no longer allowed to act in ways that blur those lines. I think that the most important thing to do when you realize that you've overstepped a boundary or that someone else is stepping on your boundaries and you're not going to be able to collaborate anymore, or they're not a good partner for you, or they've decided that they don't want to work with you anymore for some reason or whatever it is, to just simply accept it and be at peace with it and not argue. I think the worst thing to do is to try to convince someone who's on the other side of a flaming bridge that they really need to pour the water on right now. They're not going to do it, you know? I mean, you really need to just let it be okay that you screwed up or that they were a jerk and move on. And like, of all the people that have ever worked with me that I've really, made suffer, like, I just apologize openly. Like, I am not perfect. And of all the people that I've helped, I am really grateful for the opportunity to sort of push something positive forward. But in the end, it's probably going to come out at about a 0, and that's pretty good. If you get through life at about a 0, no harm, no foul. A little bit of positive, a little bit of negative. Just try to be a non-force, is what my math teacher used to tell me in grad school. I just want to be a non-force. Like, just, you're not making nuclear weapons when you make video games, and you're also not solving cancer necessarily, although some of us kind of are. But, it is what it is. So just try to be patient and accept the fact when you make a mistake, and also accept the fact that people make mistakes. Nobody's really trying to hurt you that hard, in this community. Once you get beyond us into the players and the general population, then there's identity politics and stuff. But I think within our community, we're generally pretty kind.
Other questions for Robin?
So you make experimental games, and you like supporting experimental games. Have you seen any new funding models or new ideas for how to keep sustainable businesses making?
Yeah, so the question is about sustainable funding for video games. I am actually working on one of those right now. I have a little idea, which if anyone's interested, they can come and talk to me about it afterwards. I've been starting to promote it within a few of my communities. But I believe that we should have a fund that is dedicated to supporting underrepresented minorities in games, in particular making different games in a sustainable fashion. That's a lot more like microlending, where a bunch of people put a bunch of money into a fund, and then we give it out in small loans, and if you can, you pay it back, and if you pay it back, you can suggest someone else to partake. Like really basic kind of stuff. I think the reason that the Children's Television Workshop exists and that PBS exists is because there was a time when we were convinced that we need to create products and entertainment for children that would help them overcome the sort of scourge of racism and hatred that was like dividing our country. And so we made stuff like Mr. Rogers and Sesame Street. And like when I grew up, in my imagination, I lived in New York City the whole time. Like I was just there with Maria, just hanging out, in the Stuffaluffagus. We really did do something fantastic with that fund. And I think it changed me, and it made me into a person that could talk about my feelings in a way that my parents never could. And I think we should do that for games now. I think it's important to do it now before it's too late, especially with AR and VR technologies, which have so much more impact on the way that you remember the experience itself.
Other questions? Your chance to ask Robin. Yes.
How do I deal with firing people? Well, that's a really good question. It's changed over the course of Funomena's history. At first, I've always been the kind of person who says you should just fire someone when it's not working out. But then when you run the business, it's really hard because you really appreciate their contribution, and they've been really great. We've been pretty lucky in that we haven't really had to fire that many people. We have had to lay off some people because of, like I said, financial difficulties, but, they ended up in better places. I think the best thing to do is to make it very clear to the person when they start to screw up. Or they start to not be able to cope, or whatever the situation is. Because a lot of times it's not really deliberate. It's just a variety of circumstances that are beyond your personal control as a company or as a CEO, is to make it clear that things aren't going the way you expected, and to manage that expectation. And I think that the thing that makes firing people or letting people go or transitioning people out of an organization difficult is when those expectations haven't been expressed, and then there's regret on the part of the person on either side, or resentment. the thing that I work on really hard right now is being okay for things not working out and, not blaming myself and being like, oh, if only I'd mentored them better or whatever. Like, not everybody that comes to Funomena needs to stay at Funomena. And some people have come through and done amazing work and then gone on to do even better amazing work or start their own companies. And that's amazing. Like, that's actually what we kind of wanted, was to be an engine. Like, the reason the company is called Funomena is because we want it to create momentum. We don't necessarily want everyone who comes into Funomena to stay forever. So now when I recruit people, I say to them, listen, if you start to get to the place where you feel like it's not working out and you're not really feeling it, let us know, and we will do the same. And I hired a very talented person, Ludo Lab Center, who I've been friends with since Looking Glass days, a long time ago now, to come and be my director of studio development. And she's developing a program for people to come through and work on their goals and figure out how they're growing and have honest conversations all the time about are we still your number one choice? Do you really still feel like you're really doing your best work here? Because if you're not, the best thing that we can do is transition you before it becomes a situation where you need to be fired or you want to quit. Yeah, that's my coach, Marty Raphael. She's amazing. She came to me through the TED Fellows group. Kelly Santiago, who I was working with at TGC, was actually coached by her a little bit. And then we started using her kind of alternately, and then I just kept working with Marty, and I've been working with her for 7 years now. I do a retreat every September. I go out to Santa Fe, and I hang out with Marty for about 3 days, and I work on my self. I create really concrete lists of things that I want to accomplish in the year, and then we go through them and we talk about what my key challenges are going to be and what the barriers are for me, and then we work on those, and then we look at the ones that from the year before and kind of go, okay, well, how far did we get and what's really stopping me? I think the number one thing that Marty does is she encourages me to be kind to myself and to get in touch with my inner goddess, which is really important because, once you're a goddess, no one can fuck with you, as the painting clearly proves, the beautiful painting. But I think she's actually just a separate voice away from everything else that I know. She's not really a gamer, but she's very interested in personal development, and she's a very spiritual person. So she was actually raised on a reservation by Indians, so she's got this really deep sense of the earth and all this kind of stuff that's it's pre-verbal for her. So she's just really down in she's on the ground. There's nothing separating her from the earth, and that really helps me because I'm not like that. I'm a million miles up in the sky in my head all the time. So she really helps me slow down. And then also just having to articulate okay, I'm really feeling anxious about this thing and I don't know what it is, but it feels like I have to be doing more of this, but I'm not doing it because this other thing. She's really able to sort of zero in on what the intuition is there and go, oh, this sounds like this problem. And because she works with executives who do the same stuff that I do, she has a very good ear for hearing a tone. And she'll go, okay, this is definitely a you're afraid to ask for help tone, or you don't believe that you really deserve this tone, or you're developing a little bit of resentment about this person not working out like you wanted tone, And then when she rings that tone back to me, I can be like, oh yeah, I got it. And then I can go off and work on it. It's expensive, but it's totally worth it. I have never regretted paying her. Never in a million years would I ever regret it. And I think it's one of those expenses that if I could have her and an assistant, I would just be so happy. So that's my goal next year, is to get an assistant, to make enough money to have an assistant so that I don't have to deal with the email.
All right, I think we have time for one more question. Yeah.
My question in regards to creative activism. I think you mentioned some examples like this micro-lending type of program that you're setting up with. That area can be kind of a thorny path of being an activist or an ally or what have you when you're trying to do that creatively. So maybe just generally, what are some successes or failures that you've had, particularly in that realm?
Yeah, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine about this recently. I've eaten a lot of diversity salad. I've eaten a lot of salad at lunches celebrating young black women and games, or girls that make games or whatever. And it's awesome, and I don't mind eating the diversity salad, but after a while, it's just it just starts to taste the same, I don't really want to eat any more salad and smile and be like, we did it, because we're not, the people in that room are not the people that need to change. We're already there, we're yeah, we made it. Let's eat some salad. This is salad is like, we're alive. Like, I can taste it. Oh my God, I'm not dead. I'm still doing it, and they haven't, shot me yet. And I think that, one of the things we need to do is to really insist that that table continues to include more and more and more of the 80 to 90% of people who aren't really eating diversity salad right now, because it's delicious. But I think that the successes that I've had have been on focused initiatives where there is money tied to a clear outcome, and that outcome is measured and commented back onto by the funders. It is so important not to be building a website, that's going to talk about diversity, or, starting a group that's going to talk about it. It is very important to be finding funding and making a concrete difference in the lives of young people who are trying to break in. And so if somebody approaches you and is like, hey, we really want to do this cool initiative, it involves setting up a web page, and then we're going to do interviews with you and stuff. You can be like, you know what? There's a lot of interviews with me already, probably. I've eaten a lot of diversity salad, that's fine. But I'd really love it if we could take that same money and put it towards scholarships to GDC, or give these people an opportunity to get their games on the App Store, or get them internships. How can you turn that money into actual jobs for people? And I think that that's actually been the most successful stuff that I've done, has been with Intel, has committed a massive amount of money to diversity, and they've donated a bunch of money. Oculus and Facebook have spent a lot of money on diversity and continue to do so, Microsoft as well. I think when real big companies put real money behind it, then you can say to EA and to Sony and to other people, hey, get on the bus. We're all doing this now. And I think that that's the most important thing. If you're going to be doing it, make sure that you're funded, because if you're doing it for free in your spare time and you're all just trying to build this boat together slowly while the waves are coming, you're just never going to get off the shore. It really is a funding thing. I think that the thing that stops us from being able to create independent content is a very, very tight-fisted and misdirected funding system that doesn't empower artists and designers, but rather empowers marketing people who know how to do the same thing over and over and over again. And we need to start making alternative pathways with the money that we make, so that artists can make things that are actually good and that actually reach real people, instead of staying in this little tiny cluster of known entities buying the same thing. It's if you made orange juice and you sold orange juice, and then suddenly you invented coffee, the orange juice people would be like, no, that's dehydrating. Nobody's going to want that. Why would they want that? No, everyone loves orange juice. Come on, man. Squeeze the oranges. What is it with this? You got to roast the beans, and you got to, this is a terrible idea, And they would be wrong. And they would also make crappy watered down orange juice that everybody has to drink at hotels, and nobody wants it. But that's what happens, right? We have to figure out ways to make a difference concretely with our own funds and our own energy, and not waste it on things that are either, seemingly free but actually labor, or that are labor going towards aggrandizing one personality or one person, or feeding someone's ego who needs to be seen as a diversity evangelist. That kind of stuff is just, there's no room for that anymore. So I really try to say okay, show me the money, And I know that sounds kind of crappy, but if you learn to ask for it, it gets easier every time you do it. So thank you so much for listening to me. I really appreciate all of your attention.
Thank you, Robin.